Hello and welcome. I can see people kind of filing in now. Welcome to Scaling Company Culture in a Remote First World. My name is Bob Thomas. I'm a principal at Ox, a fund investing in European B2B SaaS at the scale-up stage. I'm very excited to have Marina, Natalia and Leah on the panel to discuss culture sharing in a remote first world. Their introductions are going to be far more interesting than mine, so I'll get to them as quick as I can. But first, a bit of background on the conversation. The origin for this conversation came a few weeks into the COVID-19 pandemic. At Ox, we were lucky enough to be able to adjust to a new, safer reality of working from home and meeting with founders and discussing their businesses remotely rather than face-to-face. What struck me in those first few weeks was just the strangeness of shifting to a new world where we met people entirely remotely, not just the audio-visual challenge, although I think I'm probably on my third or fourth headset by now, but just the human strangeness of adapting to a totally new way of having conversations or building relationships or collaborating to build companies. If you're building a company, every aspect of people management is starting to change: sourcing, hiring, onboarding, culture, learning, performance, everything. And the second thing that struck me is how differently each company I spoke with was addressing this strange new world. There's no playbook for human connection, and as with any strange new world, this change is probably an opportunity for new ideas to emerge and for some companies to take a leading role. We at Ox are fortunate enough to be connected with a great network, founders and company builders who are leading the way on cultural leadership and organizational health, essential to building companies that can scale very quickly. I'm very much looking forward to each of our panelists introducing themselves in a moment. We've got real subject matter experts on the call, and each of them has a unique angle on our topic. But before we start, one quick point of housekeeping. We're trying to keep the panel as open and as conversational as possible, and so we really welcome questions from the audience. As you have questions, feel free to throw them into Zoom's Q&A feature, and we'll read some of them as we go through. If we don't get to your question, we'll look to cover it in a 5 or 10 minute Q&A session at the end. In total, the whole session will last about 30 minutes. Without further ado, to the experts. It would be great if we could start with some quick introductions from each of you, and perhaps a note on why you think this topic is even worth covering at all. If someone said to you, why does organizational culture even matter when you're scaling companies, how would you respond? Leah, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, thank you. I feel like being called an expert is kind of putting us on the spot there, but hopefully others will kind of see that. But thank you. So as Bob said, I'm Leah. I have worked in people roles now for coming up to about 10 years, which is scary. Started in a big corporate, then moved to a kind of a smaller company that had just been listed and gone through that process, and then moving to Goodlord, joining just before their Series B. So sort of different stages, different cultures. And I did a talk recently actually to a group of young people, and the talk was make them swipe right. Sounds a bit weird, but I was basically linking the right kind of company for you to dating essentially. But I think, culture, why is it important? It's not only about how you do things as a company, but it's understanding the people that are going to thrive and do well at your company too. So culture is your kind of shared values, the things that distinguish you to others. And it doesn't mean one's right, it doesn't mean one's wrong. If you think of football, which is quite topical at the moment, coming back, and I'm a big Liverpool supporter, so I'm really hoping today's the day. But if we look at football, there's lots of good teams with fantastic players, but everyone has a slightly different way of playing. Everyone has a slightly different following. Everyone has a slightly different culture about it. And that ultimately comes from culture. Not just the people, it comes from the leaders, it comes from what you do every day, how you make decisions, and the people you ultimately attract and kind of retain in the business. So that's why I think it's important. It gives you identity. People know, what they're joining, hopefully, and if that's going to be for them or not. And that's me. I'll stop talking.
Amazing.
Marina, do you want to kind of take it from there? Maybe with something less divisive than Liverpool. Let's not start there.
We can do if we want.
oh God. Thank you, Leah. Amazing. I totally agree. So I'm, my name is Marina Gorey. I co-founded a tech company in 2012 called Super Awesome. It's a kid tech company, and we pioneered safe technology for kids' privacy online. So I took a step back in 2018 and started really figuring out, like, what is it about what I did at Super Awesome that I love, and how do I want to convert that to value and to be of service to others. And really honing in on, like at Super Awesome, I was chief people officer, and really for me, all of this comes down to helping individuals thrive and collectively doing something really significant. And exactly what Leah said, like that culture is the thing that's going to allow you as an individual, as a business, to cultivate that environment, that opportunity, the way you do things, the behaviors that you have, that impact that person's ability to thrive, and then really, really collectively do something really significant and achieve great things. And it's hard to do that. So, I mean, it takes a lot of great culture to get there. And I have an analogy for sport as well, which I think is, I'm going to use it. It's swimming though, so it's a little bit less divisive, hopefully. But it's, I heard it from like a coach, the English rugby coach, ex-English rugby coach, who now trains the British Olympic team. And he talked about like the difference between a gold medal and a silver medal in a swim race isn't minutes or seconds, it's milliseconds. And what is it about one person that allows them to win gold and another person gets silver? And like, imagine all the inputs that go into that person's success, that relationship with their coach, the type of training they did, the nutrition, the environment they had to train in, the relationship with themselves, the food they, like, I mean, it goes on. And that's the same thing that these people, HR people, heads of people, and people ops people are all delivering and developing in companies today. And when I started as a founder, like I would have naturally like segued into the marketing, like chief marketing officer sort of scope of things. But actually, having spent a whole day scoping out how we're going to build our company and scale, and pulling our chief product officer aside and asking how we're going to automate all of the things so we didn't need more humans, and realizing we were going to need loads of humans, and knowing how complex that was going to be, I really committed to this concept of like building a culture that allows people to thrive. Because if you have to commit to it, and you have to commit to it at that early stage to genuinely achieve it and really drive real value. Okay.
And Natalia.
Thank you so much, Bob. So I'm Natalia, CEO at Codility. We're in the business of helping our customers scale their engineering teams through our assessments on our platform. But actually, I was very passionate about. So thank you for the invitation as well. I was very passionate about the topic of culture for years. So I'm with Codility for the last 8 years, and I had the privilege to co-build the company together with our founder. I took over as CEO last year, and pretty much. I see the most important thing I can do as CEO is to nurture a healthy organization, and culture is such it's pretty much that, right? It's such an important part of a healthy organization, and I feel like we have amazing people, and amazing people in the right culture without blockers will actually do amazing things. So I do see my duty in helping our team also be their best selves, right? Be their best selves, bring their best selves to work, do work that's meaningful, and through that we see actually a lot of value that we are able to deliver to our customers.
Excellent. So we're starting from a position where the three of us agree that this is an important conversation to have, which is a good starting point. I really like the kind of thread that actually ran through all three of your explanations, which was culture is about kind of taking the best people and then kind of giving them the best environment and the best support, the best nutrition if they're a swimmer, to thrive. And I guess the reason for having this conversation is the environment that these people exist in has just very dramatically changed. So it would be great to understand from your perspective how you've seen that impact in how you address kind of thriving in your employee base, and the changes that you've made to make sure that your best people continue to thrive. Natalia, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely. So one of the realizations that I had pretty early on after we moved the whole company remotely is that the biggest thing to really put our thoughts into is how is not how we keep our team engaged and not how we keep our team productive, but actually how we prevent burnout. And that's a new setting and a new realization that I felt the current situation pushed on leaders and on managers. So if there's in many places, I think that that I come from a perspective that people and employees and team members, they genuinely want to do a great job. In the current situation when everybody is locked down in their apartments, work and meetings with your colleagues actually can give it another sense of belonging and another sense of a thread of the world outside, some continuity, right? So that is actually what I saw is that it even strengthens the connection that we had between our team members, and we're really trying to help everybody to find the right balance between work and private life, and the boundaries are really shifting nowadays. So this is something that I think is very important. We definitely increased communication in writing. We did a lot of that. We did a lot of AMA sessions with leaders, get-togethers with teams. But I think this is something that a lot of teams were also figuring out. And my recent realization is that typically at our stage, so we're 130 people right now. We already rely a lot on middle managers, but in the current circumstances, we rely even more, right? Because we don't have that natural office environment where we would do get-togethers, or there would be serendipity. So really the role of and I'm very curious, Marina and Leah, whether you see the same phenomenon. But to me two things are kind of like realizations right now. First, how do we prevent burnout, and how do we keep supporting our team members in having a healthy relationship to work in the current circumstances, and also middle managers that have that important role, even more so than before. So that's in my world. How does that look in your world? So I'm super curious.
I mean, can I jump in? Yeah, is it okay?
Yeah, of course.
So I think, like, look, the way I've summarized the immediate kind of reality is this idea of, like, if you trusted your team to be productive and do a great job before, then continue to trust them, because they haven't changed. They're still the great people that you had before. Now we've got to figure out how to help them thrive, okay? Mm-hmm. And the kind of two key areas, and it's exactly what you said, is one, empower them with information, communication. So that can come through like AMAs, like much more of that, like documentation and all of that, and we'll get better at that. We'll be as good as GitLab, we'll be as good as all those guys eventually, but right now let's just do what we need to do to make sure our teams know what the priorities are, what's important, what needs to get done, what so they can make priorities their end as well. And the second part is so empower them information. Second part is help them feel valued, because like I'm telling you personally, like you'll find me in the toilet crying randomly in the middle of the day because I think I've effed up something, and I'll come out of the toilet and I'll sit at my desk and someone will smile at me and be like, that was cool, and I'll be like, totally miscalculated how well that went, or whatever, you know. It's just that smile, that high five, that interaction in the office, like empowers your, like, it kills that imposter syndrome, kills that monster like for you so much throughout the day. And so you're left on your own at home, and suddenly we fall into this trap of like, am I doing enough? And now we fall into the trap of the risk of burnout. And so what are the factors that can contribute to someone feeling valued? Well, obviously relationships and that interaction and having those high fives virtually, like, and how, like, I mean, we can talk tactically about how we can help people have that interaction. Managers are like, they were always vital. Like, I mean, managers make and break someone's success in a business, or their thriving, or retention and everything. And we've all had great managers, all crap managers, and we're all learning from them. But now today, they suddenly become super vital. And so now as a leadership team, we have to start thinking about what we're doing cascades. And now suddenly it becomes really important for the leadership team to be on top of this and to be on top of their own success and their own ability to thrive, their own ability to feel valued and to understand what it means to feel valued, to understand what our team needs, to make sure our managers have the power to answer questions when they're on the call, not come back and have blocks in the way. Even before this, we would have a situation where a manager would be, a team member would be asking for like a promotion or like, what's my next step? And the manager doesn't really know where everything's going. That manager needs to know now. That manager really needs to know what opportunities they've got to offer this person, how they can scope things, what support they can go, where it's going. And if they don't have it today, because obviously, I mean, you might not literally have it today, knowing that that's stuff that we need to have in place, that managers have like an artillery of things that they know they can't do, the perimeters of opportunity that they can communicate it, the priorities, all that side of things. So yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. Empowering information, help people feel valued, and those relationships and managers become like more vital. And now we've, as a business, got a responsibility to like really, 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 really ramp up how and where we approach that.
I couldn't agree more with everything both of you have said. And I think, I was actually thinking the other day that I am so lucky to work for Goodlord right now, because there are a lot of companies I could work for where I'd be in tears all day, every day, and just think, how on earth do I get through this? And part of that is because doing the right thing isn't a battle, it's the way we do it. And that culture is built and got us to how we are, where we are today. And there's a saying we have at Goodlord where, and I'm not promoting Goodlord, I'm just kind of trying to get that sense across, where it's, if one thing happens to one Goodlordian, it happens to all of us. And that's the approach we took when COVID hit, and we said, okay, how are we going to manage this? How do we avoid redundancies? And we asked everyone to have a little bit of short-term pain to avoid kind of long-term pain for anyone. And I think if you've built that and you've got that there, none of that needs to change. You've got to keep with the openness, the transparency, the communicating where you can, on time, from the right people. All of those good essential lessons have got to keep going. But the bit we've all been craving and missing, and maybe this is because Goodlord is a team of 120 people, 80 of those being under the age of 28, which makes me feel ancient every day. And they love coming in and seeing their friends, and they love going to the pub and having that chat. And not that we've got a drinking culture, but that spontaneous, the chat that's not on the agenda. And that's so hard to get, I think, when you're working from home, because you don't have that, oh, did you see that happen today? What did you think about that? And then the ideas generating. So how do we bring that in? And that's been the thing that's hard for us in, okay, well, do we do a Zoom? No, everyone's bored of Zoom. Everyone's got Zoom fatigue. Okay, do we do this? And we've gone a bit old school, like do a walk and talk, pick up the phone. How can I just check in? Pick up, hey, I'm not ringing for anything in particular. Had 2 minutes between calls. How are you? Or something actually, and I can't take credit for this, but Lucy and my team at Goodlord started our Goodlord breakfast radio show. It's once a month. We're now changing it to every other week due to popular demand. And it is literally an hour on a Thursday, 8 till 9, where people join in with their coffee, a bit of breakfast, whatever, on a walk, and just chat a load of rubbish, to be honest. But it's that laughing, seeing faces, all of that little bit that you're missing from the office. And I think, the culture and the good practices and all of that stuff, that's going to underpin the success over the next few months. But how do you keep that kind of spirit and I don't know, the heart of the business going when it's not, okay, we've got 55 seconds left and 4 agenda points left to cover? They're the types of things that I think, and I don't have all the answers for that, but ways we can find that is really important.
I'd love to spend a little bit more time kind of just, as Marina said, kind of talking tactics on what those ways are, because I think there's a sense in which, because of the importance of middle management, there's a risk that people do get kind of slightly functionally siloed, and they lose that kind of breadth of communication across the whole business. And it does happen in the pub or in a corridor, or as you pass people at desks. Just a sense that you're a functional part of a much bigger operation. So kind of, I guess, in addition to those 2 things that Leah's mentioned, what are the things that people have seen kind of successfully bring people in on the whole company's mission?
Natalia, do you want me to go?
Well, Leah's already kind of
I've
slightly
already
gone on this one.
spoken.
This is one of the challenges, right? You know, normally
Yeah.
in a kind of in a room when you have this conversation, body language would tell you, but no, jump ball, Marina or Natalia, who has some tactics that have been successful on this.
I think if you go back to, look, at the beginning when you're a really small company, you guys are at 130. I left Super Awesome, we're like 135. Like when there's 5 people in the room, and now you've got 10, now you've got 20, and you have meetings. Like when we had meetings back in the day, we had this luxury of like not being very, very rigorous. Like, you know, we would go on and have little chit chats at the end, and and it's actually at times you might be an hour where you were like, wow, we were talking about work, but like it wasn't the agenda, you know. And by the time you get to like 60, you're starting to think about, okay, now we've got formalized meeting settings. By you're 80, 90, 100, you are in rigor. Like you're in like, what's the agenda for the meeting? Like who's the owner? Who's following up? Like, okay, let's get out of here. And like, no, we need less meetings, 25-minute meetings. Everyone set their like Google calendar, so it defaults to like X% time maximum for a meeting. Like, and you're really putting rigor into this. And at some point, like now, with the way, like the reality we're in right now, while we're still normalizing, by the way, this is like a phased approach. Like right now, we're in the normalizing phase. This is not about perfection or like scalability as such. This is about like, how do we normalize it for the people who have never done this before? Because these people who've never done this before have to get really good at it so that they can be good at explaining how to thrive in this environment to the next person. And so lifting some of that rigor is by default is a simple way. And you can't do that by like thinking about it. Like for that to change, you now need to make a decision that has to change. And you need to communicate it to the managers that yes, this should change. And if you don't start to see it changing, you now need to make a formal like email to the team that says, by the way, we're changing the way we do meetings. X% should be like this, but you should feel like by the end of the week, you've achieved this much of chit chat. Like these things, people will not feel empowered to do it unless they see it being done, or they're at some way where, I suppose, as heads of people and like leadership, Natalia, like quantifying or qualifying why that's important, and sort of creating space for that to be okay. And then we got to factor that into like, ultimately that will impact productivity. So it's like it is this normalization of like, what's expected today to get us to tomorrow. And like being vocal about that and almost communicating that we're still figuring that out as leadership as well. Like, we want to ensure that you guys continue to have relationships, help us do that. Like that radio, amazing. And one of the guys in Seedcamp did this amazing thing where it's like randomly on a Thursday at like 6:30, he's like, oh, anybody want to join me for a glass of wine? And you're like, yes. And what happened was he did it a couple of times, and then it didn't happen again. And then I did a quick chat to everybody about what's working, what's not working. And the number one thing, everybody was like, I loved it when he did the wine, and can we do more of the wine? And so he needed to feel that feedback that this is working. So having a finger on the pulse of what's working and giving that like feedback loop and qualifying it as from a leadership perspective that this is valued and this helps. You can get things like the donut app, like, you know, to plug into your Slack, where you can just like it automatically matches people to go for coffees and have chats together online. You can normalize that by saying, here's what a chat looks like. Honestly, people don't even know what a chat, like imagine when you started doing one-on-ones and you didn't know what a one-on-one looked like. The way you learned or understood like how to have a valuable one-on-one is someone went, a great one-on-one looks like this. You cover these kind of topics. It's formal, it's more informal. Like explain to people, we're going to do these donut chats. When you do it, don't use video, call your person on their phone. Just use your voice. 15 minutes is the max, like, because otherwise it won't work like long-term for everybody. 5 minutes is the expectation. Like suddenly now you've got a 5-minute chat. And you're like, okay, that's cool. Like, okay, less like of a thing to do, less of an impact, but like impact. Okay, I've actually got work to do right now. I've got kids that, like, if I don't get my work done in this slot right now, my husband's going to take over and it's his slot, and that work's not going to get done. Being able to have, and then again, going back to the point of formalizing it a little bit, allows you to have that chat with your manager where you're like, this is actually impacting negatively and now we need to change it, or this is working. Yeah, you know, I can go on. I'm rambling now.
No. We've got a question from the audience, which is about onboarding new people when they've never seen the office or culture. And this is something that we at Oct have kind of been through in the last few weeks, but would be great to get your guys' perspective on that. Natalia, how do you kind of hire people and bring them on board and give them a sense of Codility's values when they've never stepped foot in a Codility office?
we've actually done that. We had a batch of altogether over the last 3 months. We onboarded 10 people remotely. Some of them have seen our office when they were still interviewing with us, but some not. So some joined a fully remote organization. So we always had a really structured onboarding process with sessions, topical sessions, with functional leaders. That is working well for us in this structure as well. But something that we've also done and now we strengthened is there are two things. So one is buddy system. So we whomever is onboarded, they have a buddy, most likely from their team, not a manager, right? So somebody that they can feel they trust to ask sometimes what they might feel like a silly question, right? Or they want to find something, or they want to find something on internal wiki, or they want to orient themselves. So buddies definitely help. Buddies would typically check in daily with people that were onboarding. So that is one aspect. The second one is we made deliberate get-togethers with the teams. So more of a, okay, let's have a coffee. Here are our new employees. We animated it a little bit. So we had to be a little bit more deliberate about that, about replacing that in-office presence that we're currently missing, and that I feel worked really well for us. So yeah, but I agree, it's a challenge. Actually, I think hiring people remotely is less of a challenge than onboarding people remotely, interestingly. So from my perspective, if you're able to, first of all, if you're able to do your work remotely, that means you can hire people remotely. No reason not to. But it's true that typically, if in the past you were not a fully remote organization, onboarding is really an office experience. So that we had to upgrade to the new normal.
Sorry for are you okay if I jump in here? Sorry for my internet messing out. We should probably just stop saying that. I think one of those things as well, like everything Natalia has just said there, but one thing people don't get that we realize is the stories and the way we do things. So those examples that, when I said we were saying, okay, it's a little bit of pain for all Goodlordians, the new starters were like, but do you really mean that though? Like, where are the stories of this happening before? And so sharing those with them, and two things we've done that have gone down quite well. We make every new starter, we don't force them, but we ask every new starter to do an intro Lord. It started when it was 5 people at Goodlord, and now, it continues happening. It's a 5-minute, this is who I am, normally is in the office, we're now doing them remotely. And we've asked some of our old timers, our goldies, to actually start doing their intro Lords again. So people say, oh, I've heard of Ross, or I've heard of Tom. Mm-hmm. What's the deal there? And they get to know them a little bit. And then we're also doing a Friday lunchtime with each member of the management team, because like you said, if you don't work with that person, you might not actually ever see that management team member. And it's not about, Friday lunchtime with could be on anything. William did it on shares and what your Goodlord shares mean. Great. Another one has been about the most influential, but I mean, they range massively, but those kind of stories and the way people do things as well, just to kind of try and bring that to life a little bit for people.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a fantastic realization that actually culture is built on stories. So therefore, if you want to scale culture, you actually continue to lead with stories, right? Because they show you, I think they show you the essence of culture very often.
Absolutely.
I think the other point that I find really challenging right now around onboarding people is if you're a remote first company and you've been building for remote, you've probably been hiring people who like to work remotely and have chosen consciously to work remotely and thought that through. Whereas now we're hiring people who typically would have actually worked in an office. They might have dreamed of like the day when they worked remotely and they work from home every day, whatever. But like in reality, it takes special types of skills that we're all developing now. And I would look for people in my team who have managed to figure some parts of it out. and who are quite capable of communicating like what has worked well for them and tips and tricks around it. Same as back in the day when you would be probably still training the team about like time management or small things like tips and tricks around like how to like just get on top of like your priorities. Like it's the same idea. Like how do we continue to get really good at being remote by ensuring the next person gets the best start?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of our questions in the chat is what emotional intelligence is important to support the recruitment, reward and development of team members? And I think that kind of speaks to that, which is kind of what is the skill that you have to learn to support people who are not used to kind of working this way as they transition to working this way. So I'd be interested to get people's views on that as the most important skill. And then I guess as a final question, as I can see we're kind of starting to run up on time, I would love to know, are people going back? Do people think that their organization or organizations generally will transition back, and kind of what's their view on where this goes? Natalia, why don't you kick us off?
I start with the second part. So for us, we actually decided to deliberately look for things that we loved in our offices and what we love in the current situation, and do a conscious mix. Our team doesn't feel 5 days in the office any longer, but they also don't feel 5 days all the time remotely, not seeing anybody as well, right? So for us, it will most likely be a blend. I personally think that the current situation showed us that we can really work from anywhere. So I also think that what we see as workplace got extended. So workplace, typically in the past, we would think workplace is an office culture, and right, office perhaps how we run offices, right? How we meet with people. But to me right now, the definition of the office is that it's physical and virtual. It's everything, right? It's how we communicate. Our workplace is how we communicate on Slack. Our workplace is how do we do meetings. Our workplace is what do we do if we meet in person once it's possible as well. So for us, it's definitely going to be a blend, way more flexible than before. And we are telling the team that we will support working from anywhere, and a setup that means that everybody can do their best possible work. If for some people it means come to the office, work with your colleagues from the office, great. We'll allow that, right? If you or like support that and nurture it. If that means do most of your work remotely, perfect as well. So I kind of feel like we should. I don't think that it's about should we go to the office or be a remote company, but more like how can we support our team in doing their best possible work, pretty much.
I agree on that. I was having this discussion with somebody the other day, and it was we were chatting about returning to the office and approaches we're taking. We're also doing a kind of a blend, but we were saying, do you know what? The office is less about work in the sense of I go and sit down at my desk and I work. I think the office is going to become more of like a place of collaboration, innovation. You go there to meet with your team. Like that's what the office is going to be about. That's the things that people miss about it. Probably actually we've all hold our hands up and say, I get so much more done at home because there's nobody there tapping on my shoulder every 5 minutes. But what we're craving, I think, or maybe I'm just speaking for myself, is the buzz, the creativity, the breakout. And I think office space will probably start being less desk centric and more kind of breakout rooms and all of that stuff.
Yeah, totally. I mean, mad, right? Like totally mad, but like obvious now.
Yeah. Who would have thought in the 21st century we might change the way that offices look? Like it's so exciting.
I think companies will start to put some sort of guides in place, not rules, I hope, but guides around, okay, Tuesday mornings are a really good time that we'd like to see the majority of people in the office, because then we can plan office team-based stuff. That allows people, that empowers the team then to plan their own schedules as well. That type of principle-based structure might start to come into play a little bit. But yeah, totally agree, Leah and Natalia.
Excellent. There's kind of a bit of demand in the chat that we keep going. People seem to be enjoying this, and we've got a couple more questions. So if people have time for another 5 minutes, it would be great to answer Peter and Jonathan's questions. Let's start with Peter's question, which is an interesting one. What do the panel suggest for having tough conversations remotely? the ones you would previously have had to have face to face. I mean, we've all heard the kind of horror stories of people laying off staff on kind of mass Zoom calls, which I would say is probably at one end of the spectrum. What do we think is at the other end of the spectrum? Marina, have you seen kind of best practice here?
Yeah. Look, I think, yeah, that end of the spectrum is a certain end of the spectrum that we're not, it's so far off the other spectrum that most people aren't even thinking that way. They're thinking like they're genuinely, their intentions in the best place. And so what are the tactical things that can make it go smoothly? Like, I think, okay, up to now, like, honestly, you probably should have just kept your bad feedback to yourself, because everybody was in survival mode. And like, if you're not going to genuinely, if it's not going to like genuinely help that person like keep their job, like, right up to now, probably smooth and safe would have been a better tactic, probably. But now we are getting to that normalization where we do need to start being able to communicate the things that are going to help the individual thrive longer term and go into the next phase and start to get really like focused and be their best self. I mean, yeah, for sure. And so feedback is super vital and super, well, I mean, there's lots of theory on this, but I believe that feedback is really valuable, and I'm really big, I really value feedback. And but the thing is, you have to remember, different people receive feedback in different ways. So I value feedback. So when you give me feedback, I'm like, yes, got it, thank you. Whereas the next person may feel like that's the last thing they want to hear right now. So you have to really think of an individual by individual basis. So there's no one size fits all for feedback. I've heard some tips around like prepping the person. So like, if you're going to have a feedback session and you know there's going to be some areas for growth, then, and hopefully there are, because that's your job. Like, your job is to find the spots where that person can't see their opportunity for improvement, and to have their back and to see their blind side. And so when you're ready and you've prepared and you've got that great advice for them or feedback for them, prep them. In our one-on-one next week, I'd love to start to introduce back in our feedback, start things. Why don't we do it slightly less formally? So maybe we could start doing our one-on-ones in a format where, like, can you sit on a couch and grab a coffee, and I'll sit on the couch and grab a coffee, and that way at least what we'll be doing is having a chat. And so you're openly saying like, hey, like, I want this to be back where it was before, like, and how can we get there, and have you any ideas? And so when you sit down, like, lots of people will do like sandwich this, sandwich that, like, just really think through what it is that you are communicating, and if it's valuable, why it's valuable, and what you want this person to take from it. Give them time to digest it. Ask them, you know, what's coming through for you? Like, how, like, what are they hearing? Because you don't want to leave the call and there's something like spiraled. And remember, when we were in the office environment, when that spiral started, we walked out and we got a high five, like, from someone else, you know, for something else that we did great. And we don't have that. You might also want to say, by the way, when you were in the office, you used to walk out of here and we'd have a one-on-one and I might give you feedback, and you probably got a high five of somebody. You didn't feel so bad about it. So please remember, like, this is just me trying to help you improve. And if it's useful, call Mary, because I know you guys are really good friends, and like chat through the feedback with her after, you know, and have like that as a buddy thing almost. Like, but like, okay, I think my main point is be super conscious of it's not the same. It is important that we start getting good at this, being prepared and being together in the process with the individual, and thinking of other ways that you can help support the person beyond the call.
One thing I'd just say, that really simple, practical tip. I've had a few conversations that are not perfect over Zoom or Hangout, and body language, by, you know, reading their body language is so important, because some people are just going to switch off, stop listening, and that's the point to stop, phone them, whatever it might be, but give them some space. But also your body language, you know, and this goes to interviewing, difficult conversations. If you're not in the conversation, I know I find it really hard when I'm not with people to stay focused. Like, this is using a lot of my attention right now just to like stay on the screen. But if you're having a difficult conversation with somebody and you're looking at Slack over here and you're being distracted by the wasp flying around up there or whatever it is, it's so much more kind of transparent on a video call. And I think it's really, really being aware of your body language, your tone, what's not being said, but what can you pick up on? And I think that's a skill as managers and leaders we're probably all going to keep developing over this time, which will definitely help us.
Fantastic insights. I have two more practical, very practical, very tactical tips to add or suggestions for people who are having such conversations. So one is and I always try to preach it to everybody whenever you give, no matter that, and now it's even more important. So whenever you give feedback, check whether the person is ready to receive it, and ask for consent to give this feedback, even in a situation where I'm superior in my position, right, to somebody. I would still ask for consent. I think even more so I have a duty to do that because of the power imbalance coming from different titles, right? So I would ask for consent. Is that a good moment for the person to receive it? If not, then perhaps let's find another one, right? Are they do they welcome that? So that's that consent I feel is very important, even more so today. And the second practical suggestion I would have is lead with your intention and express the intention, right? So I think it's very easy to in the current world, as you're saying, you don't have that let's say supportive office environment, other people. It's easy to stay in your head and then go out of the call and pretty much have a terrible day about it, right? So if I'm in a position to give to have a difficult conversation with somebody, or to give constructive feedback, I would always also express explicitly say what my intention is, right? For example, I really want to work with you. I really want to see you grow. I'm here to support you. And this is what I'm also going to say, right? So making that explicit, I think, will also create more psychological safety for the person. And it's really about balancing accountability with psychological safety, in my view.
And that sense of kind of psychological safety has never been more important, at a point where people feel a huge amount of psychological unsafety, probably much more than they ever have done during their professional life, certainly. Okay, so one more question from Jonathan then, and this is, I think, kind of quite a nice one to finish on, which is, if you were to give a new starter in your organization a single piece of advice as to how to work remotely effectively within your culture, what would that be? How should they kind of arrive day one at their own desk at home rather than in the office and pick up?
I'll jump in with a really quick one. Like obviously all of the brilliant onboarding stuff that you need to do to obviously empower that person and get them off on the right footing. But a tip I would start introducing right now is, when you're on calls, you will very quickly come to the assumption that everybody in this company loves each other, knows each other inside out, because we behave like that and we vibe off each other and we have a great time together. But actually, those 4 people over there joined last week, those 4 people over there joined 6 months ago. Like, just set some context for, like, you will feel part of this very quickly. So don't feel on the outside just because it's almost like you are, but you're not. You know what I mean? I would get good at explaining that, basically.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think sort of linking to that is, we are very good at Goodlord about saying how we're feeling. You know, hey, heads up, just starting this call, had a really rubbish argument with my housemate last night. Like, if I'm a bit off, that's why. And kind of being honest about it and setting the scene, because people won't have seen that, and why, you know, maybe your decision making is a bit harsher that day, or whatever it is, and making people aware. And I think with new starters as well, you know, for us, we're not sure what their best self is, what their normal self is, and so it's hard to tell if something's happening or if they need a bit more support, because we're still learning that. So speak up. You know, you don't have to tell us your whole life story, obviously, but if something is bothering you, or, you know, whatever it is, let us know. And likewise, if something we explained which we assumed you knew and you're unsure, please just ask, because, you know, otherwise you're going to maybe fret, come to your own conclusions, decide that this isn't the place for you, when actually it just took one question. And as much as we should be anticipating those, you can't always anticipate everything. So a little bit of help both ways in getting to the same place goes a long way, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Natalia, what advice would you give to a new starter at Codility?
For us, bring your full self to work, and we welcome you. Pretty much that. And if you're seeing things not working, let us know. There will be things that are working. There will be things that are not working. We welcome fresh perspective. So please do share.
Yeah.
Excellent. Guys, we've gone a little bit over time, but I really appreciate you taking the extra time. It's been really insightful. I think, you know, anyone who's either kind of building a company or investing in scaling companies and thinking about culture can take a lot from this. And closing on a message of transparency, where we're all experiencing each other's spare rooms for the first time, is a nice way to finish it. So thank you very much for taking the time. And yeah, we'll close it there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.